Hey everyone, today we're going to continue talking about the Cold War. That war we're fighting isn't going to happen directly, and where there's really going to be a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States having a capitalist system where people make their own economic decisions, and the Soviet Union being a communist country where the government makes the economic decisions for them. So, we talked last time about that and about that the United States and the Soviet Union were racing for better weapons, for who's more powerful. And the weapons that they were racing for were these atomic and hydrogen bombs, always trying to outdo each other with who has the bigger weapon, who has the bigger bomb. But they're also going to be competing with each other over who has better technology and who can get to space first would really show that. So on October 4th, 1957, this little guy right here looks like a little basketball with some antennas on him. This is one of our first artificial satellites, and when I say ours, I don't mean the United States, I mean really the world's. So this is Sputnik 1. The Soviet Union has beat the United States to space and has launched this first artificial satellite into outer space. It's going to orbit the Earth, go around the Earth for just a few weeks, and then it's going to disintegrate and fall back into the atmosphere. So it's not about this satellites, not about Sputnik's capabilities. It's about the fact that the Soviet Union was able to launch this guy up into space. So that's going to really scare the United States, and it's going to start the space race. So whereas the United States started the arms race and got the first atomic weapon, the Soviet Union is the first one to get to space. So now the United States is freaking out and like, hey, we need to get to space too. We need to show that the United States is smarter in terms of technology and space exploration. And that's exactly what they're going to try to do. So like we said, Sputnik shows the United States that the Soviets may be smarter than them, that the Soviets are more advanced than them, that they have better technology than the United States does. And the US has to try to find a way to catch up to the Soviet Union. So there's that race for space exploration and technology. So one of the first things they're going to do is create the organization we know today as NASA here in Houston, Texas, and Florida as well. What it stands for is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and that's going to be the U.S. Space Program Agency for the most part. And they're also going to create an act. Remember, an act is just a law, so the United States is going to pass an act called the National Defense and Education Act, otherwise known as the NDEA. And what this is going to do is really have our schools have the U.S. kids focus on math and science education, science, technology, engineering, math, STEM. Let's have a focus on that in United States schools. So then we have more mathematicians, we have more engineers, we have more technology majors, we have more scientists, and these people can help the United States catch up to the Soviet Union and make gains on the Soviet Union. So the goal really is to, with the NDEA, the National Defense and Education Act, is to make sure the U.S. kids are smarter than those Soviet kids and that the U.S. becomes a smarter nation. So the response to Sputnik 1 is the creation of NASA, so the United States can actually try to get to space and actually start having a space program and start conducting tests to get to outer space and actually in space. And then the NDA make sure there's a focus on math and science education, make sure U.S. kids are smarter than Soviet kids. Let's look at a few important highlights of the space race. So we know it starts in 1957. Sputnik 1 is launched, and also Sputnik 2 is going to be launched, where the Soviet Union is going to send Laika, the first dog, into space, and he's going to die sadly pretty quick after he's sent up there, as there was no real way to get him down. So the U.S., in response, as we already said, creates NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and the NDEA, and focuses on STEM, science, and math education. And then in 1961, they're going to up the Soviet Union's dog and send Ham the space chimp. And Ham will survive. He will go up into space. He will perform a number of tests. And if they trained him that if he performs the test, he gets a treat. And then he will fall safely back pretty quickly, with only within a few hours, I believe, back into the ocean, and he will be recovered safely. So far, who's winning the space race? Probably the United States. But then the Soviet Union sends the first man into space, an astronaut named Yuri Gagarin, and he becomes the first man to go into space. Now, he didn't go to the moon. He's just going to go into space, and he will safely come back from space. So Soviet Union is obviously winning now. That's a big jump from sending a chimp to sending a man. And then in 1969, 8 years later, the U.S. will be successful in not only sending a man to space, but sending multiple people to the moon in the Apollo 11 mission. And Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong become the first people to land on the moon. So this pretty much concludes the space race, but the race for better technology still continues. So this proves, this really highlights the tension and them trying to one-up each other, the U.S. and the Soviet Union, throughout this Cold War. Who has the better weapons with the arms race? Who has better technology with the space race? Who can explore space better with the space race? So that's what's happening. Now let's talk about a few benefits of this space race. So a lot of innovations are going to come out of the space race. As NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is preparing to go to space and performing all these tests and making sure everything's safe for astronauts, a lot of things that we have in our daily life today come from this race to space. A lot of new technologies come out that are not just for astronauts, but are for really everyone. So the padding in football helmets today is some of the same padding that they used for the astronauts, their spacesuits. Satellite technology, obviously with Sputnik and sending people and animals and such into space, satellite technology has really exploded because of this space race today, and it's very important. It even helps us with things like this. You may know this as GPS. You probably have it on your phone now instead of a Garmin, though. What this stands for is Global Positioning Systems, GPS. Where is your position on the globe? This technology comes from the space race because it's very entwined with satellite technology. Dried food, you might see this like at Fry's Electronics if you live in Houston. You can't have liquids in space because the molecules will literally separate and fly all over the place as there's zero gravity. So food has to be very solid, and there's literally space food. Tempur-Pedic mattresses, aka memory foam. Memory foam is used in the space shuttle, in the spacesuits, so on. So if you have a bed like that, you're thinking the space race today. The heat-resistant fabrics, again, part of the space shuttle is a part of the fabrics that they use in the suits of astronauts. So firefighters have enhanced protection now because of the space race. Cordless power tools. Obviously, you can't have all these cords flying around in zero gravity, so there was a movement to develop cordless power tools. Enriched baby food, to make sure enriched baby food helps the children, little babies, get more nutrients, and that's also what they needed to make sure astronaut food had in it. Not baby food per se, but this technology to make sure food gets lots of nutrients in it. Thermometers, different types of thermometers that might be used. Again, cordless that you see there as well. Solar panels, solar technology, very important for the space race, and obviously used in the United States and the world more and more today as the world needs to become less reliant on fossil fuels. So all of these things, and there's many more, are innovations, inventions that come from the space race. And as we said, As we see, they don't just improve the quality of life for astronauts up in space. They improved and still today have resulted in an improved quality of life, not just for astronauts, but for everyone, including you and me today. So that is a little bit about the space race. Hope it helps. Thanks, guys.